Okay, so before we start, I want to just add a little bit to what Rachi just said in terms of to give some context. I
have eyes and
now?
light.
That's better. I'll give it a few minutes like that, just so you don't know. My background, Rachi mentioned a little bit, but I started out working in high tech. But then when I moved over to the nonprofit side, I started out as working in an Amutah, in a nonprofit in Israel, in management of an Amutah. And part of my responsibility there was fundraising. So I experienced that side of things, of soliciting and fundraising for the organization. And then I sort of moved to the other side of the table and worked for a foundation, for the Chase Family Foundation, for a bunch of years until Madoff hit the foundation, and that was the end of that. But really having sat on both sides of the table and experienced both aspects, and that's where I'm coming from at this talk today. So I want to start out by, before I pass these around, so we're talking about the art of ask. Right? That was the title of my session today. And I wanted to... Okay. No?
Just going to fix it because it's going to fall.
Oh, this happened yesterday. Well, it's just that they're not extended the same length, the legs, right? Okay. Looks like this one is not. Okay. Do you see what it is? This leg is not unscrewed as much. You're already getting up and moving, I think.
It's not super bad. Okay, switch it back.
It's not like... It's not
Forget the other way around. No, why? That's not safe. Okay, so we talk about talking about asking, right? What are we asking for? What are we talking about asking for?
What's the question?
So that's what I'm asking you. What?
the context.
The context. So okay, so that's what I'm saying. When Rachi gave an introduction, was a bit of mine. What kind of asking am I talking about? If we open that, and it'll
Asking for money.
Okay, asking for money, right?
Asking resources.
Okay. When we're asking for money, fundraising. Okay, you're fixed. So we're talking not only about actual dollars, but you're going beyond that already and saying we're asking them to give whoever them is. We're asking for more than that: participation,
databases, connections to someone, time, skills training.
Okay, but so that's great. We're going to get back. I'm going to get back to that afterwards. That's perfect. But when you talk about asking for money, solicitation, what is that word? What other words? Let's do a word association and emotional association with that.
Solicitation?
What do you solicitation? Okay. What else?
That's a word you said, right?
Yeah.
That's what you feel, you mean?
Meaning.
What are the words that come to mind, or the emotions that come to mind when we talk about soliciting money from somebody?
Association?
Yeah, in English it's very commonly used. Solicitation is a word that's very commonly used in English for soliciting money from somebody. Okay? There's no meaning to my switching color. I'm just when you have to go and ask somebody for money to fund your project. Okay?
Selling.
Sell.
You're selling your idea.
Okay.
But are you asking? You're saying for the emotional equivalent?
When I'm talking about this, what does this make you feel in here?
Extorting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like begging. It's like
Reaching.
Okay, I think I missed a few. What else? Convincing.
Or gifts.
it's nervous.
Or goodwill.
Manipulating.
That's a good one.
Creating a partnership.
What is it?
Inspiring.
Bam.
Say
Oh, hold on.
overselling.
I missed
Compromise.
He said
Inspiring. Yeah, so instead of coming with your back bent, you're like, I have this amazing thing. You have the opportunity to come join me.
Responsible. Compromise.
Didn't I write that? No. Did I heard that? Yes.
Whining and timing.
No, I wish.
Also known as schmoozing.
Well, I think whining is with an H.
Give back. Or giving back or reporting.
Power dynamic.
Fonzie,
Huh?
Fonzie.
stealing money.
Oh,
You're not the boss.
Ponzi.
That's
Oh, Ponzi. Sorry about that. I'm Israeli.
Yeah. You gotta tell me that?
Actually, I think if you have time to tell your story after we're done, that would be amazing.
I'm happy to. I'm over the post-traumatic stress disorder, so I can talk about it now. Okay. So we can see that we've got some mixed feelings here and mixed emotions about this. Okay, I'm going to pass these around because I know it's much easier to take notes on the slides.
יום, שחזרו לנו שניים אחורה.
Oh, you don't need to put the
תודה. אחד, יש גם גם.
It might be on this side. Yeah, that's fine. Yofi. Okay. So we see that there's like mixed emotions here about it. It makes you sometimes feel uncomfortable in what you have to do. So I wanted to, I know the slide doesn't look so good in the print, I'm sorry. But I wanted to give this some, the Jewish context about giving, because when you're asking people to give money, which is going to be giving tzedakah, right? If you're talking about a nonprofit or your project, then that's what we're talking about here. So tzedakah is obviously a value that's rooted deeply in our Jewish heritage and Jewish context, and is a very important Jewish value. So I wanted to I brought a few of these sources, and I'm going to give credit to Ray Ringel here on the collection of the quotes here, and some of the other thoughts in this presentation. But because the print is not so great, let's have somebody read these out loud for a second. Volunteer, somebody? You can have a tandem of the Hebrew and English going.
Justice, justice shall you pursue in order that you may live and inherit the land that Hashem your God has given to you.
Okay, somebody do the Hebrew.
צדק צדק תרדוף למען תחיה והרשת את הארץ כאשר אדוני אלוהיך נתן לך.
Happy are those who act justly, who do righteousness, tzedakah, at all times.
A person runs to do just good and kind deeds and attains life, success, and honor.
Just as a person lights one candle from another, and the original flame is not diminished, so too we are never lessened when we pass on our eternal flame to another person.
I didn't go get the Hebrew version of that, sorry. Next. Kelly?
Those who turn to the many to tzedakah shall shine like the stars. המשכילים יזהירו כזוהר הרקיע ומצדקי הרבים ככוכבים לעולם ועד.
And last English one. Okay, if a person convinces another person to give, the reward is greater than when they give on their own. Okay, so anybody comments? What do you connect with? What resonates with you?
I like the tzedek more than the tzedakah. I think that when you do a social business, I'd probably like to go for something that's more tzedek, creating more equality or correcting some kind of wrong than tzedakah, which would just be giving money to something, and less, more social. Maybe tzedek would be more social business.
Okay, nice. Anybody go?
I like the person's light does not diminish, and because it kind of fights a very human urge of hoarding and keeping what's yours. Like if you have a really good tip, then you want to keep it to yourselves, or an expertise or something, and this kind of gently battles that and encourages to share and to both wealth and knowledge. And
I think an extrapolation of that Chachamim talk about is also that when you give, your giving is not going to diminish what you have. You won't lose by giving to others, and that goes for anything you give, as you're talking about tips and advice, and from what you have in terms of and wealth as well. Like you will, and I think that's what we're, you see at the top there. We're talking about if you give, you will get. There is direct reward to giving tzedakah. Judaism is teaching us that give tzedakah because you will be rewarded for giving tzedakah. Whether it's with talk about inheriting the land, or you'll have life, success, and honor, happiness. Okay, that's what you'll get for giving tzedakah. Yeah.
I really like the last one because basically what they said. You're able to change, to influence, to alter one's sets of values. Basically, you taught it something about himself, about the world. You change something in him and then stay probably.
Okay. Yeah. Remind me your name. Sorry.
I once met a Volk survivor who said that their family was very in touch with the neighbors, and neighbors ended up living in a born Jewish neighborhood, the neighbors, and they decided to help them during the war. And she said that her parents always taught her that what you decide to give to others, no one can take from you. And she realized while their neighbors helped them, she realized that whatever they gave them during their neighboring years, no one, the Germans couldn't take from them, and that's why they helped them. So
that's beautiful.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Whatever you decide to give to others, no one can take from you. So she was in Poland or something like that. So they helped the neighbors during the years as part of being good neighbors. And when the Germans came, they couldn't take that from them.
Yeah.
They could take everything. They could take the house, they could take the money that they were left with, but they couldn't take
the dignity
deep
and the
feeling, the connection with the neighbors.
That's really nice. Thank you.
I like very much that tzedek tirdof, because it's ongoing pursuit after something that by doing that, by walking this road, by walking this way, you are inherited the country, you are already inherited. It's a kind of a past progressive in Hebrew, it's interesting, or a past future in Hebrew. It's vayarashta. Vayarashta, it's for the future, and yarashta is already in the past. Once you've gone this way, you're already there, you're already in the promised land. Which God gave you.
God bless you. I'll throw in another thing about that a really nice one that I like. Why does it say tzedek tzedek? So why twice? And the explanation they give is that you should pursue justice in a just way. Right? Not, Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to sum this up. If we see, first we talked about the fact that giving tzedakah is a deep value that's rooted deeply in our Jewish heritage and culture and values. But I like the fact that towards the end we see these last two quotes that talk about the fact that by getting others to give, there's even greater value. Okay, so that takes us back to our jobs sometimes as a solicitor, as the fundraiser, either for our project or if you're fundraising for something else, if you're a lay leader for some other organization. Our culture talks about that and tells us there's value to that. There's even greater value, right? If a person convinces another person to give, their reward is greater than when they give themselves. So getting somebody else to give tzedakah is of greater value than you giving tzedakah yourself.
A soldier of mine called Yoel, once he finished his army service, they opened a big organization called Noa Gorlin, the New Guardian, where he
guard the lands in Galileo, farmers from Bedouins that steals his cows, his horses, and basically his land. And he's raising donations. And he once told me, when I talked to him a week ago, and he told me I'm doing a great favors for those rich people because they feel like they've made a lot of money, haven't done a really meaningful thing with it, and I'm doing them a really big favor by asking them, and this is how they feel, this is what they told me. It's not just they, this is, I think it summons I think the last sentence.
Absolutely. So remind me your name again?
Aviv.
Aviv. So thank you very much, Aviv. It's as if I planted you in here. Because that takes us right on to our next slide and what I want to talk about. So, why are we asking? Why are we asking somebody for money? And I'm going to go directly to what Aviv was talking about. Because you guys are the ones out there in the field doing the work. You're out there starting projects, doing all kinds of things that have to do with social justice and all the projects to better the community and the environment and society and Jewish life. And when you come to a donor, most often, we're talking about people who are not out there in the field doing this work. They can't. Either they're too old, or they're too removed, or we're talking about Israel and they're not in Israel. But what they do through you. Okay? That's my motto, and that's what, because this talk is a lot about changing your frame of mind and how you think about the task of ask. Okay? And you have to keep this in mind. They're doing through you. You're giving them the opportunity to be influential and to be impactful on society. And you've heard donors, like just imagine this conversation between one donor just calling up her friend and saying, you know what I just did? I just built a new, computerized classroom in a marginalized community down south in Israel. What's that? I built, right? You gave them the opportunity to build by asking them for money, by asking for them to be involved in your organization through their charitable dollars. You've given them the opportunity to have an impact. Okay? Lynn Schusterman often says, and ROIers here will know, she says, I make it possible, you make it happen. Right? Without you guys making it happen, she can't. She's not there, right? So you have to look at this as an opportunity, as an honor, whether it's because of your Jewish sources that tell you that you're going to get a greater reward for soliciting money from other people and getting them involved in projects and giving tzedakah, or whether it's exactly what Aviv was telling us, right? You're giving them the opportunity to do through you.
Do you find that works better on organizations abroad than in Israel?
I think that what I'm talking about here is a lot of a psychology, of a frame of mind that we, as people who are going to ask for money, have to have, so that you don't come with these senses of this feeling of begging, of extortion, of being nervous, of feeling like you're being manipulative towards the people that you're talking to, but really come believing in your project and believing that you're doing a good thing by asking them to get, wherever it is that you're sitting in front of, to ask them to get involved in your project through charitable dollars, but also through advice, etc. And we'll get to that soon. Okay?
Well, we talked about it also earlier. What is the value proposition either for the crowd or for the donor? If you enter any museum, you will see a big wall with plaques with the names of the donors that gave thousands of dollars, or different other things. How to connect with at the end of the program with the donor and your crowd, and connect them and create an event or something.
Yeah, so I think, again, it depends, right, why the plaque is there and who it's for. But I think in general, that the idea of getting them, you're doing the work for them. And that has to be the frame of mind that you're in. Now, when we're going to solicit and to fundraise, then the question is, who do we woo? Okay? For the Israelis, everybody got that, who do woo? Who are you going after? Now, this is where it depends on the structure of an organization, of a charitable organization. Some foundations, sometimes you're going to be talking to a donor that doesn't have any professional staff. Sometimes you're going to talk to you're going to get the opportunity, even though they have a professional staff, to get directly to the funder. Other times you have to go through their program officer, who is usually the title for people working in a foundation. Or you might have to deal with a gatekeeper, whether there is staff or not, which is usually a very strong personality person who whose sole job is to stop you from getting to the funder and bombarding them with requests, okay? Now, the way to go about fundraising when dealing with each one of these is different. Mainly, I was when I was thinking about this presentation today, I could have gone the route of talking about the whole program officer approach, and that has to do with grant writing, etc. That's a whole one direction. How to speak to funders and how to make your pitch to a funder and what to think about when you craft that, that's where I'm going to take this today. But clearly you have to tailor your approach whatever way you go. So you're in, just another word before we get to this, specifically when you have the opportunity to, if you're in a cocktail party, a networking event, you have the opportunity to bump into a funder or an investor, whether it's on the business side also, you're not, the quick pitch, the elevator pitch that you're going to be dealing with in this training seminar, you're not going to give that pitch in 1 second and expect them to open their checkbook and start writing a check, right? I mean, I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. The idea is to make a quick pitch, make a quick impression, tell one little anecdote that'll get you in the door for that next meeting where you'll have time to come prepared, organize, and give a proper pitch, okay? So that's what we're talking about here, not that 2-second bumping into somebody at a cocktail party. So when you're preparing for such a meeting, first of all, do your homework, okay? Homework as kids, we got it from school, but that's something that we assume everybody knows. You got to prepare. You got to come prepared, because when you come prepared, it shows. You know your stuff. Justin was alluding to this also on Monday morning, right? When he said, if you come, you can fudge a meeting if you didn't prepare for it, but it'll show. And if you come to a meeting like this, you've done your homework, and that means you've researched the donor, you've tried to find out what interests them, what other things they funded before. All like a total 360 about this donor and about your project. You gotta know your stuff, okay? Now, the 3 no's. Know yourself. And what am I referring to here? I'm talking about the fact you gotta know how to tell your story and how it connects to your project, venture, organization, whatever it is you're selling. And you've gotta be ready to be open and talk about it. If there's a real personal story, tell it. That's going to be powerful. You got to be able to share why you've decided to put your time and money into this project. Because otherwise, why should they? Right? Know your donors. I was saying before. Find out what interests them, what moves them, what makes them tick, what doesn't. Don't go there. Okay? You can tell your story in different ways. Avoid the pitfalls that you should be prepared for. And know your product. And know your product, 1 second. You know your product, I mean, you should know how to give a 1-sentence pitch, a 22-sentence pitch, the classic short pitch. You should be able to know how, give yourself, I mean, I could do an exercise, but I didn't want to do it because of time. But sit down for yourself and for your own exercise, write 5 different ways that you can tell your story that would interest different groups of people. Okay, so you need to be able to tell your story from different angles, whether it's the Jewish people story, or it's the Jewish community story, it's the Israel story, it's the Aliyah. Whatever your topic is, I'm sure you can figure out how you approach it from different ways, so that you tailor it to each person that you're talking to. It's not I mean, guys, present tense is good on working on a pitch. But that pitch, I mean, when it's a business, it might be different, but the pitch also has to be able to be customized to your audience, and that's really important. Benji.
Yeah, just in terms of knowing your donor, I think even more than just, in addition, like knowing professionally, like this is, I think, someone you want a partnership with, and they have to like you as a person. So I think anything you can get to get in with them, anything with their family, their past, where they live, like anything to make a personal connection, hobbies, whatever. I think.
Absolutely, and then I think that comes also from your field. You pick up on those nuances, I think, more than most people. But it's absolutely true. Like if you can tie in a personal connection and not just tie into something you read about them, all the better.
So I had my beliefs collide through ROI PR. I'm having a very famous Jewish newspaper doing a story about Shabbat Yelvi and ROI and how it became. And the ROI person kind of prepped me and helped me realize what's good to say on the interview and what's not. And I don't like to talk about myself. It always feels awkward, not because I don't feel confident, because I think it's out of place. Like it's not about me, it's about Shabbat Yelvi. And she told me, no, You have to tell your story. You being a secular Jew who had no connection to Judaism, finding that beautiful Judaism that makes you link, that is the story of Shabbat Yovi. If you tell only about Shabbat Yovi, you have not told your story. And so just to emphasize,
Absolutely.
and I still feel uncomfortable with that, but I'm going to do it.
It's much more interesting for people to hear it from your personal angle. When I was working for a nonprofit called Kolot, so there was the guy, Moti Babo, who founded and started and ran the organization, and then I came in as the associate director, and part of my job was to do fundraising. So going with Moti, clearly he's going to have to make the pitch. It's his story, how he founded this, what drove him to it, what did it. And my story is less interesting when you know, paralleled. But when in meetings on my own, I've got to find my own story, my voice, how I connect. Because if I just come and give the organizational pitch, it's boring. It's not exciting. It's not that different than other organizations and other pitches that this same donor is going to hear. If I can find my voice, know my story, and how I can tell my story in a way that connects, that's where I'll get it.
Which technically just allows them to understand that the organization actually touches the people. That's what they want to hear.
So that's what we're talking about here. And when we make our case in support of the organization, then we want to make sure that we're really clear in our message, but also we have to remember that people connect to people and to vision. And not so much to your beautiful brochure, and all that's important and part of the packaging you want to bring. But you've got to be clear about your vision and you want them to connect as a person to you. And that goes back to all what we just talked about people connecting to people and to a personal story that's behind the organization. And again, just flying through this, why do you need the money? You want to be clear about why you need the money, why they should give the money to this particular project, and then tell a story, draw a picture of what it'll look like if they do, and if they don't, decide to commit to your organization.
Can I just say
Yeah.
You don't want to use guilt though.
Absolutely.
You don't want to, if you don't give back, there will be poverty and things. How do you find that balance?
You're right. So we don't have to take it to an extreme of
Yeah.
like if their dollars don't go in that direction, but it could be a trend or a direction of where things can be as a way to loop back to tell your story of what you're doing, what you're contributing by doing the work that you're doing. Right? Because you won't be able to get that work done and to improve and then go into the positive side.
The status quo.
Right. Okay, so we're talking about setting the stage for now we've gotten to the point where we're at that meeting, right? So Justin and we talked about this a little bit on Monday morning. Come relaxed, come prepared, put on your power outfit, feel like you're owning the space. Start out by being polite and thank the donor for taking this meeting, right? Okay, but now here comes the important thing. Don't start right off with, boom, I've got my 22-sentence pitch, and bombard the donor with that. Rather, prepare a great opening question, because what you want to do is, now that you've prepared and you've learned about the donor and you know a lot about them, but you want to get into a value-based conversation with them. Because you want to learn more about them. You want to hear what they have to say, because what you want to hear is get to that point of what makes them tick. What's going to make them want to get involved in your organization, in your story? What are their philanthropic interests? What's going to make them feel they want to get personal benefit out of this so they can go and brag that this is what they've gotten involved in? And then you're going to tailor your story and your pitch to those interests of theirs. Okay?
Can you give an example of a question? Like you don't come in and say, what's going to make you give me? You need to be just a bit more subtle.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about, going back to my example of Kolot, for instance, talk about the situation in Israel where there's very weak study of Jewish texts in schools in the regular secular education in Israel today, leading to people not knowing or being familiar enough or feeling ownership of Jewish texts. And go in that direction, have a discussion with them, hear their opinion about it, and then lead to, from there, into what your organization is doing to deal with that issue. Right?
So
yeah.
Also just maybe be careful not to feel like, so how do you deal with texts? Don't put them on the spot of maybe they're doing the exact same thing that you're trying to prevent, or
Right, absolutely. And also be very careful to listen so that, first of all, you can pick up on the nuances and know how to respond to them in real time. Okay? And then listen to their story. Get the ideas to open them up, to tell you more, and then listen to their story. Because what you're going to want to do is just what you did in your presentation and your thinking of how your personal story connects to your organization and what you're working on. You want to be able to tie their story in as well, so that then you can make craft a benefit statement that will show them how, by getting involved in your organization, they're going to fulfill those personal interests of theirs and feel that they've gotten real benefit out of being involved in your organization. Okay? Clearly, share your excitement. Enthusiasm is contagious. If you can speak in an enthusiastic way about the topic, it shows something. There's a reason for that, right? And then, again, you're going to sell customized benefits. You're not selling a piece of chewing gum and you're going to sell it in the same way to every single person you speak to. You're going to customize it and connect it to their personal story. And then we get to the compelling ask. Okay? Now, when you get to that point that you're making the ask, it's got to encompass all of this. You've got to have the facts, okay? And you've got to be very, very in control of the facts that you're sharing. You want to bring in stories and personal experiences. Some of your own, but also bring in stories of the children that you're impacting or the person who told you how it impacted and changed their life, etc. That's where the emotion is going to come in and show. And then you're going to give them the call to action. Now, the call to action, here again, it's a matter of being in control of the information. You've got to come to the meeting knowing all the facts. You have to know what your overall budget is so that you can quote that. But you have to have in your head some different modular structures. So you can give them a call to action where you want to say, if you give us X amount of dollars, you are going to computerize another 20 classrooms in a marginalized town in southern Israel. Or this amount of money will allow us to take this project and now do it in another city or another 5 cities. Get a sense of how much you can ask for, but that you should know in advance. But come with a modular system that can offer them different ways that's tangible. They can feel what they've given. So it's not just dollars, but it's dollars that you're putting to work, and they'll know how to go and talk about this afterwards and say exactly what their dollars did.
In your experience, would it be like most innovators get the chance to share this with their emotion, with the gatekeeper or with the donor?
You're going to try and get to the donor because that's, he's got the decision-making power.
So the gatekeepers don't make the decisions?
It depends on the structure of the different organization. The gatekeeper is usually somebody who's going to pass the information on to the funder. If you're working in a foundation that has more staff, you're going to need to usually go through the staff people. Hopefully you can also get the opportunity to pitch it directly to the funder, and that's where the emotion and your personality is going to come out more. When you're just working with a written proposal, it's tougher, but again, I would still include all of these components. Let them get a sense of it. When somebody finishes reading your document, it has to jump out at them a story, an example, something that they can take and repeat easily. Okay.
I just throw out one line that I heard that you reminded me of. There was this line that somebody shared with me once, sort of in humor, but if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money.
Okay. Okay, speaking of language, so continuing to what Justin just said, and you were saying it before also, Kaylee, don't say you need to, you have to, you must give us, okay? Stay away from that kind of language. And in terms of the language, and this connector that you were talking about earlier, we're talking about asking them for advice, asking them to sit on a board, to be part of a committee. We don't just want them for their dollars. We want them to feel good about this. We'll take whatever advice they want to give us. We'll figure out what to do with it. We'll find a way to make it work for us. But if the dollar, we want to make them, you're building a relationship, not a one-time thing. And in order to build a relationship, you want their personality. You want them to be invested in this, not just for their dollars. And then there's also the issue at the meeting of body language and eye contact, which is also super important. I want to share with you a personal story here. We had a meeting with Stanley and Pamela Chase when we were at the foundation. And a woman who was representing and fundraising for an organization came to give us a pitch. And I guess either she didn't prepare or in the way she prepared, she felt that she was the decision-making person in this meeting was Stanley Chase. And she sat with her entire body language and eye contact only talking to Stanley Chase the entire meeting. Halfway through, Pamela got so angry that she got up and left the meeting in the middle. Needless to say, you know what the result was. This was not a successful fundraising meeting and a waste of time. Because it doesn't matter what decision-making power she normally had or didn't have in this relationship. That one, she put her foot down. So that was the end of that. So really, really important. Their body language, eye contact, and real language in mind doing this.
No?
Yeah.
Just wanted to add on to what you said. How about we don't just want the dollars, we want their advice, their input. Because if the relationship goes well, hopefully they'll give again. Like it's not a one-time thing. Like
Absolutely.
It's stuff the relationship go well.
Absolutely. And the way to do that is if you're going to get involved with them and you got to know them and created a relationship in this meeting and know now what makes them tick, knows their life story, their personal, all of that stuff, then you have more of a basis to continue the contact with them around, and not just send them a report showing them what you did with their money, but rather what you did with their advice. Oh, I read this article, this connects to what we discussed, etc. Okay, and you've created a bond with them by sharing your personal story as well. Okay, so not all meetings are going to go smoothly, and you're going to meet up with resistance sometimes. So I'll go to this one first. Don't take it personally. Okay, this is part of the process, it's part of the task, and it happens. There are ways to fix it afterwards, hopefully, usually, but this is don't be completely discouraged by that.
You cannot manage feeling by taking this personally. It's always
but you have to develop a little bit of thick skin and be rational about understanding what part is personal and. Okay, listening carefully, because you've got to be focused and listen carefully, because you want to know when you realize that something has gone wrong in the meeting or there's an issue that's causing resistance. You want to be able to play it back in your head right away. Figure out what that was because you were listening carefully and correct that right away. Okay? Any issue that the donor raises, don't be afraid to answer and answer honestly. If you don't know, say so. After the meeting, go back, find out the information, figure it out, and then be in touch again by email or whatever it is and fill in the gaps. But don't be afraid to be honest and say that you don't know. If they're asking a question, restate the question to make sure that you understood exactly what they were asking and where the exact issue that they're questioning is, so that you can answer correctly. I don't think I have to even say the fact that don't argue. Be honest. If they have an opinion, it can turn into a discussion, but don't argue. And don't rush. If it seems to you in the meeting that they are saying no already, like if you're getting this vibe, it might just be because they're not ready to say yes yet. Stick with it, keep going, and don't rush. Take your time, and this is a process. You are not necessarily going to walk out of that first meeting with a check in your hand. You're building a relationship, whether it's you're going to get the check right away and then you want to have another meeting afterwards in a year or 6 months, or if it's going to take you more than one meeting to get to that point. And do your best to leave a good impression. 3 months later, the donor is not going to remember how well you answered a specific question that he had or what exactly you said, but rather the way you made them feel about this project and about what you're doing, and that's the emotion that's going to stick with them, that's going to make them continue this relationship with you.
Now, can I add something?
Yeah.
There's two pieces to this that I would add. In the ask, when you put the ask on the table, it's important actually to just be quiet for a minute. because it's a really uncomfortable thing that we tend to like to rush in because it's a really uncomfortable moment and we're almost so uncomfortable about getting it out that we just keep talking and sometimes quiet allows them to process. And the second thing is that my favorite answer is no. Because no allows me to continue the relationship further. Sometimes yes happens so quickly that it's just sort of a way to finish off. And some of my best donor relationships have come out of the first time them saying no. Because I've been very gracious and I've loved saying, you know, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to continue the conversation. I've sent them articles about various things, even not relating to the organization, just things that we talked about. And 6 months later, a year later, you never know what is so interesting that your organization is going to be doing that's going to relate to them. So those are the two pieces, is one being quiet enough to be able to hear what's going on, and the second is taking no as the beginning of the relationship.
Right. I think you remind me also that there are times that when you were referring to it, sometimes sounds funny to say that a yes is the end of the relationship because you have a meeting and somebody feels like, okay, I just want to get them out of my door and I don't want to see them again, and they'll give you, you know, whatever the amount is for them. Here's a $5,000 check and get out. I don't want to hear from you again. Whereas if you spent a little bit more time cultivating the relationship, a few more meetings, you would have gotten a bigger check that would last, you know, and a relationship that would last longer over time. So again, not to be discouraged by that, no.
Do you find that donors like to meet heads of organizations? For example, a lot of initiatives aren't on their own. There are a lot of time collaborates with you. So you'd be part of a big organization, or you know, you'd have an organization being the face, but you would have like another initiative inside the organization. And then the donors would say, yeah, but I don't want to meet you. I want to meet the head of a big organization. So that happens a lot. So how do you like get a donor to understand, yeah, maybe I have a chairman, but I'm the head of the project that we want you to invest in, rather than, no, I'm just the chairman.
I think it's the flip side of what I was saying earlier in terms of who you're meeting in on the foundation side, right? So there's, you know, yeah, ideally everybody, the top guy wants to meet the top guy and you never want to compromise on that. And you want to try and get to the funder, and then you're saying, what if the funder wants to get to my CEO? So you might get to the CEO, but right now you're in a meeting. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be happy to introduce you to my CEO or arrange for a meeting, for sure. Some CEOs are charismatic and can tell the story and do a good job. Some don't. Right. And you're better off as the fundraiser not bringing the CEO into the room. Okay, so you got to play it by ear. In each case is a different situation, but in the moment you're there. And yes, they again don't argue. Right? They want to meet the CEO with pleasure. I'd love to set up a meeting. Now let's go back to our conversation. Okay, I think Mira probably told you that yesterday, right? How to answer. Did she talk about how responding to questions from the press and stuff?
Yeah. ABC.
Right? So answer, bridge, and then continue. Okay? What was she saying? Close?
Close with your
message.
Okay, so same thing.
Yeah, I think continue is much more like...
Don't divert me. You want to ask a question? Fine, I'll answer, but now let me continue where I want to be.
Oh, then where's the...
Okay, and now when you close, leave the donor with a good impression that they did something good. And we're going to connect back to what Marnie said. Whether they said yes, no, maybe, later, whatever it is, they gave you their time of day. That's valuable enough. They listened to you. They heard you. You don't know where this is going to go from here. Be as thankful and grateful for that, you know, for that meeting as if you just got the world.
I don't know if this is the same. I mean, when I do that, I think of like people say like the dating world, like if you want to date with someone, maybe that was the right person, but they didn't have friends. Maybe this donor, maybe that was right for them. Maybe they know someone who was better. Does that happen?
Very nice.
Does that happen?
My friend, it could, absolutely could. It could be somebody that you'll say, I don't give in this area, but contact my friend, and that's what we're going to talk about. Suggest other people, ask for recommendations of who can get involved. Whether you got a positive or a negative, you're not going to walk out there without at least asking them to think of other people that you should turn to for, back to where Ray's comments, either for dollars or for time, brain, intelligence, whatever it is, that who else can give me advice, who else can get involved in my organization. Getting involved is the full package.
Incidentally, I got a board member that way.
Exactly.
I went in and I had an ask, and the guy said to me, I'm happy to give you that. And I said, being the person that I am, I said, I'd like to ask you an additional question. And he said, yes. And I said, I was wondering if you would consider joining our board. We're looking to build up our expertise and knowledge, and it would be really helpful. He looked at me and goes, you know what, I know what you're really asking for. And I said, what? And he said, you're asking for connections. And I said, well, partially, yes, you are correct. I am looking for some connections, but I've gotten to know you, and I think that you would particularly be helpful. He goes, you know what, there's a better person for your board than me. He said, I'm too old for you. Interesting answer. Okay.
When he met you, was that the dating world?
He said I'm too old for you. And he wasn't wrong. He's 83. But he also still works, and he's also in the finance world. So as far as I was concerned, I would have taken him. And he said, I have the better person as my daughter. And he was 100% right, because I got to keep him involved through his daughter. And I got his daughter's entire venture capital. So he was 100% right. And if I had just sort of let it go, I wouldn't have gotten it.
So is that after you say no for a donation?
He gave me a lesser donation initially than I asked for. My goal in having him on the board was for his continued involvement to eventually bring in more money from him, but also because I knew the world that he was coming from, so I was looking at it from two perspectives. And then when he gave me his daughter, I realized it was like I got two gifts instead of one.
What organization was that? What organization was that? What kind of work did you do?
It was to build a camp here.
Okay, so we'll talk about this point. So this links back to what I had said earlier about they do through you. So when you walk out of there, whether they gave or they need to think about it, but they need to know what their dollars are going to do. Okay, I'm not giving to present tense. I want to know that my dollars are going to fund another chair, or another fellow in the global fellowship, or another full program in Detroit, or whatever it happens to be. So reiterate that so that they walk out of there with total clarity of what they've just done for the world. Because as far as they're concerned, they're doing it with their dollars. Okay, and again, that phone call to their friend to brag on what they're doing, you're really not part of it. Okay, make sure you've got clarity and your agreement on the next steps, whether it's we're going to meet again, whether I'm going to get a check in 3 months, 6 months, whether you're going to give me you've pledged a certain amount of money, what's the payment schedule, what's my reporting schedule.
I don't call you.
You don't want that, okay? Because if you would walk out of the meeting without clarity on the next steps, you might send emails, phone calls, and you might not get an answer. Because many of these donors are not going to start answering. Even if they took the time to meet with you, they won't start answering emails. You want to make sure that you've wrapped this meeting up and closed it, and didn't just walk out of there because you, as Marty said, got that ask out, and now you just want to get out of there. Okay? So you've got to know what you've got and what the next steps are, and review them with the donor so there's clarity between the two of you on what this is, and there's not lack of clarity there. Suggest other ways they can get involved. Invite them for a site visit next time they're in the area. Tell them to come pick them up for a site visit. There's nothing like letting them feel a part of it. Okay? Ask for recommendations for other people to get involved, board members, money, etc. Leave the beautiful material that you brought with you so that they have it, so that they can brag about their new project, or they can share it with others. Okay. And again, I'm going to go back to what Marnie said. Before you run out of there because you managed to say that, this is where people botch and mess it up the most, and it has the most devastating results. When you forget to say thank you, you messed up. Take the time, the presence, think about it, thank them. They deserve it and they expect it. Okay, but again, whether it was for their promise, for their pledge, for their time, for their advice, connections, Rolodex, whatever it is.
So are we still talking about the actual meeting? Is this an actual thank you, literal, or?
So this is literal at the meeting. This is afterwards, okay? You're gonna, you finish saying thank you, you're also gonna take the time to write a personal note, thanking them, recap your meeting, what you discussed, the personal things. If they gave you some personal information, get it into your calendar, okay?
Sorry, what was that?
If they shared personal information, their daughter's bat mitzvah, their son's wedding date, get it into your calendar. I mean, if you're doing serious fundraising, you should have a tracking system that you should have sort of a card for every donor, tracking your conversations with them and what came up, so that you can follow up, create that personal relationship with them. And first of all, obviously know what you've asked for. Before you forget, what you've asked for, what they answer, so that you can follow up properly on that, but the personal stuff as well. Again, goes back to what we talked before. Make sure they understand and demonstrate to them how their gift will impact the constituents. Let them know if this is part of a larger campaign, update them as to where you stand with this larger campaign, what the response of other donors was, and what you've succeeded in raising. And stay in touch on a personal level, update them, invite them to any event at your organization, share information with them, stories, successes, etc., and solicit more ideas from them to get them to engage with your organization. Okay, a couple of things to remember, and this is part of the motivational part of this. And we said people don't give to brochures, they give to people and to vision, and that's what you're there to tell. You're there, and again, loops back to Ellie, what you were talking about. Once you've gotten this meeting with the donor, this is your opportunity to shine and jump out of the paper. Because when you're dealing with a program officer, it's paper. Here, this is your opportunity to show your emotion, your enthusiasm, your personal connection. This is where they're going to people to people and to your vision. Okay? Less about asking, more about believing that your cause is important enough to talk to other people about, to get other people involved and behind. And when you're committed, it shows. Okay? Now, oops. You want to... here. Down here.
There.
Okay, so I threw in a little bit. This part is less about the meeting, and more about a follow-up, and a little bit sort of if you've gotten a charitable gift, and you're dealing now with this is more around, less when you're dealing with a single donor, but more when you're dealing with a foundation, with the professional staff, you've got a reporting. And I've had several conversations over the years with ROIers and other young people, and this is like so important and sometimes gets so overlooked, and it really shouldn't. If you get a grant from a foundation, you're gonna get a letter with the grant letter telling you that you received it, and you'll have like 2, 3, 5 pages of guidelines. Read it, check it, and read it again, and again, and again, okay? And then be religious about respecting every aspect of what it says in there. If it tells you when to report, put those reporting dates into your calendar, go a month before and put a reminder, and 2 months before and put another reminder. Don't be late in submitting reports. It pisses them off, and you don't want to do that, okay? Usually, it'll also tell you the cap on how many pages your report can be. Don't go beyond it, because they'll simply separate it and read the first 7 pages if that was the maximum, and they won't go past that. So you haven't done anything right yet, okay? Give credit as requested. Very often, they will tell you how they want to be credited. If it's the Schusterman Family Foundation, but they write that they want to get credit as the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation, then you've got to do it the right way. Sometimes they'll send you the logo. Use their logo when you put it. They'll tell you that they want it in every brochure, or if it's a teacher's toolkit in every guide that you print, or if you're doing a Kabbalat Shabbat and you're printing out copies and they want their logo on the back of every one, then that's what you do. Because you really don't want to piss them off and them to get one of these and see that their logo's not there. Okay? So time frame, dates, length of proposal, and the logos. Don't be late in applying. Find out when what their renewal cycle is. Talk to your program officer. Now, again, sometimes there are foundations that have program officers that don't want to have communication with you. They'll let you apply, they'll let you know that you got in, they want to receive the reports, but they don't have a personal relationship with you. In other instances, which is more the case, you'll develop a rapport with the program officer that you're working with. Again, invest, I mean, this is a whole different, talk, but invest in that relationship and make sure you're in touch with them. Find out if they'll do multi-year funding. That's, much easier for you. Find out what the options for renewal are, when you can renew, discuss with them what aspects of your program, should you renew for general operating, should you renew for a certain project, are they now interested in something else that you're doing, etc.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I was once in a situation where we did like a big Muslim Jewish cookbook piece and Pick and Pay, which is one of the grocery stores, sponsored it. And we had their logo on everything. And we got a lot of media attention. And the media don't want to report on, and the sponsors were Pick and Pay. So like we had lots of interviews, and I think it was mentioned, but in all the media that came out, it wasn't like Pick and Pay's cookbook piece. And when I sent in, it's just something that stuck in my mind, because when I sent an email thanking them, the response was, oh, I saw all the media, Pick and Pay wasn't already mentioned. And it was a really hard one to deal with. I don't know if I should have been more pushy and insisting that the journalists were, or if there's like a technique to...
I don't think that there's a technique here. I think with media, a lot of it is not in your hands. You can do what you need to do, and once you put it out there everywhere, they're not going to pick up on the sponsor, right? Unless it's called the marker, 2020, 2021. Then we had a different situation. We had a foundation that insisted that their logo be in certain dimensions on everything we did, and they gave us nothing. They gave like $5,000, and they insisted their name being everywhere, versus the other large foundations that were the main supporters didn't want their logo anywhere. So rather than this terribly lopsided situation where every single piece of paper had this logo on it that was meaningless. They probably didn't even sponsor enough money to for the paper that was printed in so many copies. So, but again, you've got to respect their request. This is how they do their giving. You got to do it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's running forward.
Without questions.
I don't know if it's going a bit forward, but I find that the hardest, the place where everything crashes is when you actually come to sign a contract. It's like they say yes, and then you have to sign a contract, that's what you get for what the money you give, and then it starts. So who writes the contract? So some foundations will give you their contract, but if it's like a corporation or like somebody who's giving $5,000, say, oh, you do it because we don't want to invest the money or whatever, and then send it to us and we'll fix it. And then you're kind of running around, wait, who's writing it? And then nobody signs it, and it changes to it. And the minute before you get the money, everything crashes because nobody signs the contract, and you lose all the money. So you've done all the work, and usually small innovations don't really have a lawyer to get the contract running.
So first of all, I think it's referred to often as a grant letter, which has contractual, holding, but not necessarily a contract. As far as I know, most foundations have their own grant agreements that they will send out. But if you're tasked with doing that, the internet is out there, and there are sites where you can find standard grant agreements. And to the other points that you made, you finished your meeting, run through, take notes in the meeting, showing them, okay, so I have written down that we're going to get $100,000 over the course of 2 years in 2 payments each year. This is going to go to general operating, or this is going to go specifically towards the rent the bus program, and for lunches for 100,000 kids over X amount of time, okay? Walk out of the meeting with clear understanding of what was agreed upon. Where the money's going, how it's going, what payments, what reporting, all that you can do in the meeting. Take quick notes.
Grants a lot of the times pull the money after they've kind of given a consent.
I'd add to that, anytime I have a meeting with a funder, it's a delicate situation. If it's just an individual, I don't tend to write back to them and say, thank you very much for your $100,000 gift, because that's a little tacky. You're dealing with like an individual person. But when it comes down to foundations and we have certain understandings and I've left a meeting and I understand that by X date we need to provide them with this report, or this government official is going to provide us with this document and they're expecting to see it in order for the next round of funding to come out. I actually, after every meeting with the foundation, write out a summary of the meeting that we had and send it send it back to the foundation, and I also send it to the internal stakeholders in our organization so that everybody's on the same page and that there's no, in my case, there were like cultural, like, you know, I had a meeting in America, but it's really the Israeli organization that needed to know the different deadlines and so on and so forth. And that way everybody's on the same page. If there's any confusion, you can go back and you can say on X date, you know, we had this meeting and it was summarized in this email. Please let me know if there's anything that was not understandable, and that, you know, I always reinforce everything with written communication.
Right. And the communication with the details go back to the foundation, to the professional staff.
Right.
You send a thank you letter to the donor with an overall thank you, and thank you for giving us a gift and getting involved and putting yourself behind the organization and taking the time, etc. The details, the summary, for sure, the summary has to go out, but that goes to the foundation staff. Okay, that's not to the, yeah.
How would you describe the difference in between business and getting money from a grant or from a donor?
Again?
It's the idea. I see my financial behavior as an.
Can you shut the window?
I see a lot of the times, or I try to look at it from a different perspective, my economical behavior as an investment. I got today 2 calls from for an organization I'm investing in, Celcom, and my internet supplier. And they're telling me, like, what is the difference between the behavior in between a client and a business, in between a donor and someone who's donating to? Do you see any? Because I would expect all what you came through or what you follow through to have the same relationship in between, you know, a business and a client, or organization and a user using the service.
Yeah, a lot of it is definitely, you know, the same terminology, same idea. I mean, even the concept, right? You're building a relationship in order to get them to give a donation or make an investment. I mean, a lot of it is definitely the same. In general, in fundraising, and charity, it's a little bit more. It's a little softer. It's a little bit more, and you know, there's more of the emotional side. In business, there's going to be a lot more, you know, hard facts and objectives, and they're going to want to see, you know, numbers, and want to see revenue, etc., and profit. That's not what they're going to be looking at here. Many times, it's going to be in terms of them, the donor making a decision to get involved in your organization. It's going to be something that's going to make them tick over here, and that's not. I mean, it's great in business if somebody, if an investor, gets excited about a product. But more often than not, it's not a matter of getting excited about it. It's more often seeing that this is a good investment opportunity in terms of bringing in profit and stocks, etc. So definitely, a lot of what I was talking about is relationship building and how to have, you know, conversation about an investment. So definitely there's a lot of parallels to that with the business side.
Can I ask you something? I've been thinking about that also while you're speaking, because there's like this whole concept, I don't know how big it is in Israel, of like angel investors and patient capital, who are people who are investing because they want a return, but also they want a social good. So it's either to get their money back, sometimes even to make a profit. So I don't know how much this occurs in the non-profit world, but often they want some sort of social impact measurement. And there's like a lot of different indicators and metrics. And do you find you have to give that to donors? Do they request it?
Yeah, that goes into the whole world of, you know, measuring success and all that and that. There's a big difference in, you know, the for-profit world where there's definitely, you know, there's measurements. You can't just, you know, argue with hard numbers. And in nonprofit, sometimes, you know, when you get into the whole issue of metrics of success, then the question is, how do you measure impact? And sometimes you can, you can show in numbers. We had this many children go through our program. What did that do to them is another question. And oftentimes when we're talking about these kind of in these fields, it's a much softer issue. Yes, you can get into measurements of changes in attitudes and behavior and beliefs, but that's a different and that's a different type of study, which also can be you can put numbers to it, sort of, and evaluate it. But you have to be very careful in how you present it, because you can say, like I said, you put this many children, we fed this many children. Well, feeding actually is easier, but when you put this many children through the program, what was the impact that you had? And that's on the constituents that went through the program. And that's something, again, that's where you can, I think, the personal stories, the personal experiences, the one-on-one examples that you can give what's going to paint the picture, or help paint the picture. But that's definitely the soft spot and the tougher aspect of when it comes to nonprofit and sort of doing social good. And that's when that's why you need to cultivate the relationship, because you need their buy-in, you need their belief. You want them, when they pick up your report, that you've got their buy-in, they believe in it, they know this part is doing good, they just want to hear and read more about what you did. You don't want them, they're not going back to question the whole premise of what you're doing. Sometimes, huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is so helpful. It was a great frame. It linked perfectly. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Guys, just give Noah a huge thank you for letting us be here. Thank you. And it's fun to come away from home, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Sorry for the furniture Sunday.
Can we start a tradition? I see that people are really tired. Can we start a tradition of like very short, funny or stories to like anybody?
Do you have one?
I do, but anybody else?
You have to stand in front of the room and present.
So I was in a wedding in Texas, and I took a ride back to the airport with like a Texan, a white mustache and a cowboy hat, and he had like a dead animal on his hood. And it was a friend's wedding, and the guy was driving, and his wife was next to him, and his arm was, we had a really terrific conversation, and his hand was on the back of the seat, and so he was like kind of with me for a good 40 minutes of conversation, half an hour maybe. And then he asks, he drops the line, he's like, so what do you do? And well, I work with this Jewish organization in San Francisco. And he just goes like this. Very well. Not says a word anymore the whole ride to the airport. That was like another 40 minutes. Very well. You're Jewish. I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
Another 40 minutes.
Very funny.
All right, guys. 5-minute break. We're going to come back for digital tools that can be set up. We're going back to day one.
Can I make an announcement? Whoever's in Jerusalem this weekend, we're doing a picnic on Saturday, and you're all invited. Just add me on Facebook and I'll send you an invite. In Gaza. Yeah, please come. Good food, everyone's welcome.
Also for profit only. I know a bunch who are certainly not interested in these social impacts.
I was just thinking about it in that way.
No, I like that. But I was like, I know those people don't really give a damn